Hello guys, thank you so much for coming back to watch another video on my channel. Now we all aware that Resident Evil Origins Collection is a combination of Resident Evil 0 HD and Resident Evil 1 Remake compiled together in a single package. Now let's think for a second, and based on the technology we have at the moment, what if Capcom decided to execute this idea and turn that into a single experience game, named it Resident Evil Origins Remake? Now how that would look like, and how is that even possible? Well, let's find out together in this video. As always, if you do end up liking the video, do give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. It would allow me to make more of these videos for you guys. Now before I start the video, I just want to clarify, I personally prefer these two games to have their own single individual games in the form of remakes, because I prefer to have a full-fledged experiences of these two great games which came out a decade ago. But saying that, I do love the idea of combining them together in a form of a single experience, because realistically a remake of Resident Evil 0 is the least requested remake at the moment, and the chances of getting released sooner is very slim. So by doing a single combined game, we might be able to experience the events which took place prior to Spencer Mansion and all the way to the end of that story. Now this idea may come to reality or not, as it all depends on Capcom's decision making. They have been listening and taking the feedback from the community, because they do tend to work quite closely with their fan base. So if fans do prefer the idea, then I think Capcom will be more than happy to consider it. Even recently they attempted to implement a DRM policy because of a graphic mode which has been used for a model in one of the games. However, this policy was received with a massive backlash from the community, so they reacted quickly on it and reversed this policy for the fans. Furthermore, this concept is something Capcom has already teased us before, as they try to bundle Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1 remastered into one collection. So I do think there is a realm of possibility of this getting remade into a single game, and here's a list of reasons as to why combining these games together would be a great idea. If you originally have played Resident Evil 0, then you know that game was loosely tied in with the events of Resident Evil 1. Resident Evil 0 taken a different route with the enemy design, and even the location plays out completely different. There are many questions we have in relation to the events of Resident Evil 1. For example, what happened to Bravo team prior to the rescue mission, and how they end up in that scenario, as we never get to experience from their side. How Rebecca Chambers managed to get involved in Spencer Mansion. These questions can easily be answered if the story works more cohesively in a combined single game. Another great potential to do will be, if let's say Capcom decided to make Resident Evil 1 Remake, then they can add a later expansion DLC, let's say they named it Episode 0, and do the same treatment which they did with Separate Ways DLC on Resident Evil 4 Remake. That way this will increase the value of this combined game. This concept was also applied in Resident Evil 5, as that game had a post-launch DLC in the form of Lost in Nightmares expansion, which played out the scenario with Chris and Jill prior to the events of Resident Evil 5. So if Capcom decided to execute this idea, then they can make it into a combined game down the line, and can easily name it a Resident Evil Origins Remake, which would have both scenarios in a single game. Now as I mentioned earlier in the video, that a remake of Resident Evil 0 is the least requested remake from the community. Even if you read the comments on forums or anywhere, fans have mostly been requesting a remake treatment on either Resident Evil Code Veronica Remake, Resident Evil 5 Remake, and Resident Evil 1 Remake from Capcom. Now looking at the trend on the recent releases from Capcom, we can see that they have been releasing the main number of Resident Evil titles along these remakes. So if we look realistically at the timing of the next game from Capcom, then we can predict that the next game will be Resident Evil 9, as we just had a remake in the form of Resident Evil 4 Remake. So looking at the demand on the remakes from fans, then we might have to wait a little longer before we might be able to see a remake of Resident Evil 0. By that point, Capcom might not even be interested at releasing releasing a Resident Evil 0 remake. Therefore, combining this game with Resident Evil 1 will allow this game to get a chance to be played by the modern Resident Evil fans and community who never got a chance to experience the events of Resident Evil 0. We all know that Resident Evil 0 is loosely connected with the story of Resident Evil 1, as it serves more of a spin-off than a prequel, even though it tried to mirror the same experience we had with Resident Evil 1 Remake. I personally did enjoy Resident Evil 0's gameplay, even though people had issues with the game's fundamental mechanics like frustrating dual puzzle gameplay, which ruined the experience for many players. Now looking from the outside, original Resident Evil 0 played in a similar style with the Resident Evil 1 Remake's gameplay by implementing tank control camera angles. However, the backtracking and how the control mechanics actually works in that game is actually different than Resident Evil 1 Remake. Now if we combine these games together, but Capcom will have to create a more streamlined gameplay with the modern gameplay mechanics and take out all the frustrating issues we had with the original Resident Evil 0, therefore creating a more enjoyable experience for all of us. Furthermore, the pacing of Resident Evil 0 can match to Resident Evil 1's, which will benefit the overall rhythm of the game. In some areas, Resident Evil 0 felt like a slog for me, for example, Factory Area, which I personally didn't enjoy myself. So I think Resident Evil 0 can be restructured in those areas and expand where the game shines the most, like the Umbrella training facility. Then even add more areas for us to play, like Spencer mentioned for Rebecca Chambers, so we can get to experience how she ended up in that location. Now Rebecca Chambers managed to survive the events of Resident Evil 0 and even managed to survive all the way to the end of Resident Evil 1 canonically. However, the characterization in Resident Evil 0 and Resident Evil 1 for Rebecca Chambers felt different for me, which can also be changed to cater more with the same style and the overall theme of the game. Now I loved A and B scenario from Resident Evil 2 Remake because they kept this mechanic very close to the original Resident Evil 2, which at the end gave us more insight from each character's perspective and created more replayability for the game. So if Capcom followed the same structure with Resident Evil Origins Remake, where you can connect the dots by playing through both scenarios, this would add more replayability value to the game itself. Now Resident Evil 1 took roughly around 11.5 hours to complete, and Resident Evil 0 takes roughly 10 hours according to How Long to Beat website. Now that is at least around 21 hours worth of content we can get into a single game. Now let's say if Capcom decided to restructure the game to make it more like a seamless one single experience and decided to make it roughly 18 hours long, then it will still create a pleasant value for the gamers. Now the big criticism we had with the Resident Evil 3 Remake was the cut content compared to the original game and how short it felt on its own. Now I do agree that quantity doesn't always mean quality, however, Capcom can provide a good content with that much of a playtime. A prime example we have is Resident Evil 4 Remake, which takes roughly 18 hours for the main campaign and 22 hours with the extra added content. And we all know that game turned out to be a massive success for Capcom. Now saying that, I do agree that overall pacing and the structure of Resident Evil 4 Remake is slightly different than these earlier titles. However, this is where Capcom can inject more value in the game with the addition of, let's say, more puzzle, more exploration and more content in the game, which would allow the players to be more invested without getting bored. Split the story with each scenario with each character and then do a great finale at the end of the game. Now I know some of you are going to disagree with this concept, which is completely understandable. However, this is just an idea which can possibly come true if Capcom wants to save the time with the remakes and wants to compile a story together in a form of Resident Evil Origins Remake. So what do you guys think about this idea of remaking these two games together into a single experience? Please do let me know your thoughts and opinion in the comment section down below in this video. So that's it for the video, guys. I'll catch you again with another video on my channel. Until then, look after yourself. Have a good one.